it. It is definitely very timely and very informative. We've got Mark Weber with the Tech Pros here today. He is going to be talking to us about cybersecurity and ransomware. Um, all the things you're hearing about over and over in the news. So we're very excited. This is going to be a great presentation. This is part of a new series that we're going to be doing. So keep an eye out for more presentations like this. We are, as many of you know, launching a new website in the coming weeks and months, and we will have, as part of that, a new section referred to as the Small Business Resource Center. And we will have a lot of these different webinars and presentations hosted by our chamber members for our chamber members. So something to keep an eye out. But without further ado, I'm gonna turn it over to Mark and let us get started.
Okay. Hello, everybody. This is Mark Weber. I run a company called the Technology Professionals. Used to be under my name, but I have another partner, so we just went a little more generic. One thing I wanted to talk about with all the news, it's in the news almost every single day about cybersecurity. They tell you the victims and so forth, but they don't tell you what to do. So I wanted to put together a presentation that gave you some immediate things that you can work on to help avoid being a victim. So with that said, I'll go ahead and get started. Just so you know who I am, my name's Mark Weber. I've been working with personal computers since they arrived in 1977. It was a TRS-80 back in the day. And I've worked with companies like Radio Shack, worked with the Atari reps in Dallas, worked with Commodore as a regional merchandising manager, and worked some time out at Microsoft in Las Colinas, to name a few. So 1993, it wasn't even called tech support yet. We were just asked to answer the phones answer the questions of people that were using the software and try to help them out in as plain English as we could make it. I've worked with mainframes, I've worked with local area networks, home networks, wireless networks, and what we call the Internet of Things, which are like doorbells and all the different stuff you can connect to the internet nowadays. So I'm always learning something new. I was working with Brad a little bit earlier. I'm actually presenting through my little mini Mac that I got this weekend. I wanted to try one of the new mini Macs, so that's coming to you now through the system. So in the news daily, you see this stuff. They'll tell you who the latest victim was and how many people were affected. If you missed the news yesterday, it was LinkedIn, and all that data was scraped and is now on the dark web. So there's always a victim somewhere. The group that's responsible, who they think it is. It doesn't really matter who they are, but it's happening. How big the ransom was, or how big the outage is. You're seeing it every day. You know, it's affecting infrastructure. It's affecting, financials. It's affecting cities. It's affecting hospitals or hospital systems. Basically makes their systems unusable. And average recovery, if you have to do a complete rebuild of systems, is about 5 to 7 days to rebuild all those computers, because that's about the only way we can officially get it out. Ransomware could have been paid or recovered or disappeared. Don't hope that it comes back to you. But very little is being said in the press or on TV about what you need to do to keep this from occurring to you. So we'll go into that a little more in depth. Some red flags to watch for. This is an email I received, and you can kind of tell from the looks of it that it doesn't look right. So I'm sure this isn't them, but copy and paste works very well. So it makes it real easy to make a official looking email. A couple of things you may notice is the email address up here was on Microsoft.com. So it's not who they say they are. So you see that. It's easy to create. If you're not sure, you can hover over the email address and it'll display that additional information. So let's get in the habit of doing that to try to avoid these phishing emails. Here's another one that came through. Neither one of these are from the companies they appear to be from. Surveys are a real common way to try to gather information. They're wanting to get your personal information so they can either fabricate an identity or impersonate you. So I'm not participating in surveys unless I know exactly what it's for. But even then, they've got to be worthy. So they look legit. They've got their logo. Here, it's a survey. It's all phishing. They're trying to gather information about you, email addresses, things like that. So how it happens, they don't talk much about this either. So basically, when they get you onto their email, they're going to be installing a piece of code, and that can come from clicking on a link. It could come to you through an email, could come to you through a text message. That's becoming more popular. Phone calls, and the three different terms we use for that. Email is called email phishing because they're phishing for information via email. Text messages is referred to as smishing because SMS is the abbreviation for text messages. And phone calls are vishing because they're verbal. They come through through your phone. I'm to the point my home phone stays disconnected a majority of the time because it's just machines calling my machines, not leaving any messages. So I don't need to listen to the phone ring all day for those type of messages. It's supposed to be getting better. I haven't seen it happen yet. It's maybe decreased some in phone calls, but there's still other phone providers that haven't implemented the new software. So it's supposed to get better, but it hasn't yet. There's also what we call network bots. They're basically just pieces of code that sit there just testing every connection out there to see if a system is unpatched. They're looking for security holes. If it hasn't been patched, they try to climb in through the hole. There's out-of-date systems and out-of-date software. This software is very sophisticated in the fact that it can auto-mutate. It can replace itself. It can change itself. It's trying to avoid detection. So it monitors some of the databases for antivirus signatures to see if it can get on board. And if it gets a chance to get on board, first thing it does is it checks to see, am I the current undetectable version? If not, I'm going to replace myself. But it works hard to keep avoiding detection. And some of these infections that you're hearing about have been in place for a number of months. And once it gets in place, it's going to try to gather data. So once it's on board, it is going to send information out of the infected computer. And we call that exfiltration. You'll hear that term in the news. And that's basically sending keystrokes, passwords, files out to the bad guys. And it's going into a digital bucket, and they just let that bucket fill up, and they'll look at it every so often, see if they have anything worthy of their time yet. And it can be collecting for, like I said, 6, 7, 8 months, a year. It just sits out there, and it's always, making sure it's not being detected. But that's its job in life, is to push your data out. This is because people weren't paying the ransoms before, so now they're trying to use that as leverage. So it can live there for a long time, and it just sends back that data. Whenever they want to, they've got enough data, they're going to tell that code to go through and encrypt all the files so that you won't be able to open them anymore. And then at the end of that encryption, they're going to tell you you've been infected by ransomware. So their entire purpose is to get your data out to them so they can leverage that data to get you to pay the ransom. So at that point, it's kind of turned from ransomware to what I call extortion, because now they're holding your data hostage. So it's already in their hands. They've looked through all the data, they found the financials that they need, and they figured out exactly how much money they can ask for. These buckets are labeled by country, so they don't have to pick on the country labeled US if they're in the US. They can be picking buckets that are outside the jurisdiction of where they are at. So you can't go and arrest them. So once they have all this data and they've turned on encryption, now we're going into extortion. And this really became popular as Bitcoin became available, because back in the day when people had ransoms and they wanted to get paid off, there'd be some drop point that they could monitor and maybe apprehend. But with Bitcoins, that doesn't happen. So the trick is they'll give their victim a time limit, and if they don't meet that time limit, then that data could be pushed out to the public web. It could be what they've also added to that is gaining or granting access to any bad person or whoever wants to get into your network. So they're doing all kinds of tricks to try to get you in. So it's in the payments are in Bitcoins, or for a lot of home users, sometimes they ask for gift cards, and we'll even tell you where you can go buy your gift cards and which ones, and how to avoid detection from the clerk if you're buying certain cards and such. So they're really cunning in terms of trying to get you to provide them with the means. Once you read that number off the back of the gift card, it's gone. Once that wire transfer takes place, it's gone. It's off of the US territory, and it's your bank or whatever reimbursing you. And the other thing I forgot to mention, was the could be public records. Let me go back one slide here. Okay, go back. Here we go. All right, so a lot of people will say, this sounds all scary, but I'm a small business. They're not going to pick on me. And there's nothing of value on my computer. Believe me, there is. Everything we use is up in the cloud and backed up, and we don't have the money for anything expensive. Right now with these bots, they don't care what size you are. It depends on how much they think they can get. So they're just out there mining all this data, trying to see what they can get. And if they come across something, maybe you have an account or something in the papers that they can find, and maybe they'll go try to exploit that, or a file that says passwords. They always love that.
Mark, we lost your screen share.
Oh, I'm sorry. Let me try that again. I have to jump back a page. So let's see. I gotta hit the Zoom thing. Share screen. Okay, is it back?
We've got it.
Okay, so back to the reasons I was just talking about. You're thinking you're too small to be a victim, and everything's backed up, but that's become a non-issue now, because they're just looking for any avenue to get to that data. So size doesn't matter. So these are some steps that we need to start doing to avoid attacks. And I even read this in a memo that went out via the White House to CEOs and so forth, of stuff that we need to do. And there's a lot of stuff that we can do as individuals too, but it's an all-out war right now in terms of keeping your data secure. So to give you some figures, last year, 4.2 billion was taken from individuals by scammers. Half of that was taken by from people that were over 50. And 2021 is trending close to 20 billion right now. So here's some stuff that we need to do. I need your help to get this word out to your friends, your parents, your grandparents on what to do, because I can fix hardware, I can fix software, I can fix networks, but it's the person in the seat that's clicking on stuff that we need to educate. So I'm trying to break some people of answering the phone. They answer the phone regardless of who's calling. They don't look at the caller ID. And those caller IDs can be spoofed, and they're trying to put some software in place to where those can't be spoofed anymore, and it has to be authenticated back to where it came from. But I'm still getting junk calls. I don't think all the phone systems have it yet, but they're trying to weed those out. So especially the our grandparents are the ones that will pick it up. If somebody is asking you to get on your computer, they say they're with whoever, Microsoft, Google, you name it, fill in the blank. Hang up. They're not who they say they are. You can just you can take that to the bank. They are not who they say they are. If they tell you there's a problem on your PC and they need to connect to it, that's another scam. Don't let anyone you don't know on your computer, because they are going to look for data. They're going to try to tell you you've got problems, and they aren't who they say they are. Just hang up on those people. They are not your friend. If someone's telling you there's a problem with their tablet and you need to connect it to the computer so they can then remote into the tablet, that's just another ploy to get on the computer. So hang up on those people too. When in doubt, hang up and call back the bank or the company in question from your address book or what number you have on file or on your statement, not by the number they provide. And by all means, don't follow that link in the pop-up. They have 24/7 call centers too. It's such a profitable business. They can staff. So what you can do now, these are things you need to look at. We got to get in the habit of using stronger passwords. And you need to use a password manager that uses multi-factor authentication. I use one called LastPass. On my phone, I can just it ties in with the Face ID, so I don't have to type any codes in public. So it's easy to keep all my websites with strong passwords and to use that authentication to keep my passwords secure. If I'm on my PC, there's an authentication code I have to put in. And we need to get in the habit of changing these every so often. 60, 90 days is not too intrusive. I've been places where every month you had to do it. And they also can log the passwords that you've used to keep you from reusing them, because once they determine a password, they'll try to use it if they're bad guys. So we need to somewhat rotate them or use a different password. And if you need to, just write it down, keep it in a safe place. If you're in an office environment, I wouldn't keep it in your desk drawer or under your keyboard. That's first places people look, but keep it in a safe place. Multi-factor authentication, that's something that you can set up with your phone. I'll just, let's see, I'm going to jump off the share for a second. So on let's see, okay. Like on my phone, I use Google Authenticator and also Microsoft Authenticator, but I have different codes that I can pull up. They're good for about 30 seconds, 45 seconds. I forget the timing on them, but they change colors when they're getting ready to expire. And to set them up, the places that offer multi-factor authentication, they'll give you a little QR code. You can put your camera to it, and that will allow you to add that authenticator to like Google Authenticator. The one for Microsoft is handy in the fact that they don't really rely on passwords anymore. They give you like 3 numbers, and when you're trying to log in that says check your authenticator for this number. And then you click on that one out of the three, and that authenticates you into their system. So we're trying to move beyond the username password limitation. Usernames typically are emails. There's public data, and your password is the only piece of security that you can use. So we want you to start adding the layer of multi-factor, a code that it can be text to you, but if there's an option for the phone app, use it first. So let's go back to the presentation. Where did I go? One sec. Okay, okay, so that's it. All right, so back to the, so multi-factor authentication is where we need to be heading. And accounts that you need to immediately start using multi-factor. Some people use it with their email accounts to make sure no stranger gets into their email. Social accounts, Facebook, LinkedIn, any of the social media accounts, it's good to use with them also, just to authenticate. Financial accounts, I'm going to throw in addition to banks, I'm going to say eBay and Amazon. You don't want people out on Amazon shopping on your behalf. So get a code. There's a abbreviation you'll see sometimes called OTP. It's a one-time password. It's just basically the text code that comes to you. But you want to start using these tools to keep you separate. Social Security, secure your retirement account so people can't get in there or file on your behalf, or get in and file your taxes, and any other places you allow. I see there's a question coming up. We're going to do those. I've got a place coming up at the end of that, so we do have adequate space for questions. What you can do now, and I saw this in some of the security bulletins too, upgrade your firewalls. Home users are pretty much using the standard wireless router that comes from the provider. You can upgrade those to more substantial wireless routers. I do use one that's a Norton Core. It just has an active firewall that tries to keep bad people out. If you're in a coffee shop, try using your personal hotspot versus the free Wi-Fi. Free Wi-Fi attracts people that sit there and just monitor all the network traffic, and a lot of the network traffic's not encrypted. So they're just mining data. You want to try to use your hotspots where possible, or stay off the free Wi-Fi. Your Face ID, Touch ID on some of the phones are very handy to avoid typing any codes in public. Be cautious of any emails that come from a friend that you didn't expect to hear from and asking you for something. Call them. Don't assume that it's legit, especially if you weren't expecting it. And emails from asking for immediate action. Those are what we call stressors, where they say, I'm at jail and I'm being held until you respond or transfer this money. That's pretty much a telltale sign of a scammer. And if it's your bank saying that you need something, don't follow the link. Pick up your phone and call them out of your phone book or your statement, but don't use any immediate links that pop up in front of you. Web pages, pop-ups. It doesn't, just because it appeared doesn't mean it's legit. Text messages can also be dangerous. I mentioned this earlier. It's referred to as smishing. I've got a couple on my phone right now. One says they're Microsoft, click this link. No, I don't. I have 5 numbers to identify if it's Microsoft or number. It's not Microsoft, I can tell you that. Or they'll have these tiny URLs, you got to be very careful of, because they could take you someplace you don't want to go. And a poisoned website will put that code on your computer just as well. And it infects phones too. So we want to be very careful about that. Man in the middle. This is like the coffee shop where you have somebody that's just capturing data in the middle. They're sitting in the shop just capturing packets off the network. That can be used on the SMS codes that get sent to phones. So be very careful when text messages are asking for you to send a code to another. It's a complicated scenario, but it can be used. But I'm just saying, if you want more information, there's a good link at the end. Another number that texts you asking for a code you just received, and you respond with that code to that text, that could open you up to losing that account. So you just don't want to do that. I've seen it done with Google. I've got a user that can't get into her Facebook account anymore because there's no one to call on these free accounts. You just have to keep your email, your backup email, your phone number as secure as you can, and put two-factor authentication in front, but just try not to give information away. They come at you from every way they can trying to get that information. Now I'm up to the Q&A. So I'm going to stop the share. And let me go to the Q&A section. Okay, Chuck, I love LastPass. Thank you for validating it. Regarding virus protection, all these programs fall in and out of favor. So I'm going to throw this out. I like Norton, but there's a good website that you can go to that is called av-test.org. It's a independent website. They evaluate all the antiviruses every few months, and it allows people to see what the top rated ones are, and you can see how they compare with each other. If they're not in the list, you may see them down below and they just weren't strong enough to make the list, but that's a good place to check. Brad, did you have a question?
I did. I had a couple more came through to me directly, but
okay.
Before we jump into that, I just want to thank you, Mark. This has been extremely helpful. What would you say the single biggest takeaway for today is? What should people sign off of this webinar at the end and make sure they do? Is it multi-factor authentication? Is it going through and changing passwords? What would you recommend as kind of the first thing?
Well, if they're not using strong passwords, let's start there. And use a different password per website. Don't use the same password everywhere. If you do, hackers love you. You just made their job so much easier. I had a customer, I've got his computer over here right now. He can't get into any of his email accounts or anything. And looks like I'm going to be rebuilding it at this point because I can't trust Windows because who knows who's been on it. And that's the best practice white paper is wipe the operating system, reinstall, and make it clean again. But it takes more of my time than it does his. But yeah, start with strong passwords and then enable those multi-factor authentications for especially your financials, your password managers, your places that, I've got on LastPass, I've got it on Facebook, I've got it on LinkedIn. About everywhere I get the option, I'm turning it on.
Right.
So
yeah,
I want it to make it easy for anyone.
I use 1Password, and it
yeah,
it works,
1Password's a good one.
Works great, and I had an experience where I had my login for my Netflix account hacked, which I was thinking, who wants to do that? But they changed everything, locked me out. I called Netflix, and they weren't able to do it, so they had to cancel the account, and I had to start all over. Which they had access to my credit card at that point. But
was it displayed or just last 4 digits?
I'm sorry.
Was that information displayed, or was it just the last four digits?
I believe it was probably just last four digits.
Okay.
So hopefully they weren't able to get much. I haven't seen an issue there. I've been tracking it.
I'm going to throw out another suggestion I forgot to put in the presentation. There's a website called Have I Been Pwned, and it's PWNED, where you can check to see if your email is out on the dark web and that you need to change that password ASAP. But it's a good idea to, moving targets are hard to hit.
Right.
And passwords are moving targets. So
and the the LastPass and OnePass, it's something where you can log in and use your phone and things like that too, but it creates this 14 to 20 some odd character with different special characters and nonsensical combinations there, which it works really well. And I definitely recommend people look into that. One last thing before I jump in, there's one more question I had, but how can people get in touch with you if they have questions or need some assistance from you? I'll ask you now and I'll get you to repeat it at the very end too.
Yeah, let me just throw that up. I've got it on the at the end of the slide. I just forgot to, I got off a bit too soon. Let me just go back and add.
So
go back to share. I'll share it on there.
While you're pulling that up so people can have that on the screen, the only other thing I had there, perfect. That's great. If someone is the victim of ransomware and they have the display pop up, what would you recommend they do? What's their next step?
They've had the display come up. If they're an individual, the thing we want to get out of the habit is pain. You can contact the FBI. There are authorities you can contact, but the thing that we're going to need to put you back in business is a good backup that hasn't been compromised. So if you go out to that knowbefore.com website that's on the page, there was a really good presentation and it's very lengthy. The gentleman is Ken Grimes. I'm trying to think of his first name. But he's worked in security a long time. Roger Grimes, I'm sorry. And he's got like a one-on, I'll give you the topic. It is basically just a 101 on email phishing. And he talks about, there's a strategy when if you get to that point, you want to have a response prepared. You need to probably have legal representation to address it. So there are some steps that you need to have in place before this happens. So if you're a business, you may want to talk with your attorney to see what kind of response you're going to have. If you're talking through your attorney, it's better to not be talking directly, to have the attorney speak on your behalf. So that's something to keep in mind for ransomware. Like I said, from the IT side, we're just going to be asking for your most recent backup and whatever programs that you've installed.
So that leads into Mike asked, what are 2 or 3 good backup services? And he referenced Carbonite and WD Passport, but I think I saw recently that WD, Western Digital Passport Live or something was just compromised and they wiped out a lot of backup data. So what are 2 or 3 good backup services that you recommend?
I've used Carbonite for a while, and so that's been helpful. There's another product called Acronis, which is real helpful for taking a snapshot of your current hard drive. It doesn't take that long to take the contents and put it onto an external drive. You basically boot from a CD or a USB key, and take a snapshot of what you have and put it over here on this external. When it's done, you disconnect and put that drive aside. I've got one customer that was doing that every Saturday. She did her Cronus backup, which is good. And then she took that offline. And we had an occasion where we were plagued by drive failures, and brand new computer, 3 weeks in, the drive fails. We replace it. The second drive failed 2 weeks later, and the quickest way to get back was Carbonite and Acronis. And then it didn't have, we got her back to like the last Saturday, and then you just go get the files that were backed up since Saturday. And that was took the least amount of time.
Those are some great practices that we all need to be implementing going forward.
External drives are cheap now. I mean, you can get a 2 terabyte external drive for less than $100.
Exactly. And just think about the time and the headache and the expense that would be incurred if you're not doing this. So, Mark, we really appreciate your time. Mark Weber with the Technology Pros. Mark at thetechpros.llc. For anybody that has additional questions or would like some assistance, Mark, we really appreciate it. As I mentioned at the outset, this is something that is the first of many of these new webinars that we're going to be hosting, and on our new website when that rolls out in the